Welcome to the Bookish Spell, your cozy corner for all things bookish. I'm Angie, your host, and each week I'll be diving into the magical world of books, sharing reviews, author interviews, and so much more. New episodes drop every Wednesday, so grab a cup of coffee and get ready to turn the page with me.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Hi. I can hear you good.
Wonderful.
I'm so glad to finally speak with you.
And you?
Yeah. Tell us a bit about your book.
I know, I gotta hear.
you
I'm like so excited all the time. I can't believe I finally was able to write a book. It's one of those crazy things. So I wrote this lovely book. It's called A Cursed Tale. It is a adventure, romantasy, pirate, cursed mermaid adventure that is just full of fun and whimsy and wonder and angst and all of the things. And yeah, it's a really good read. My phone is vibrating. If I get it out the way so it's not making so much noise.
Okay. Hold on a second.
Sorry.
All right. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start writing, or when did your journey begin?
So I have been writing on and off for a good few years. Ever since I was little, I've been writing little stories here and there. It's something that's always, I guess, followed through, and I have always had dreams of being a writer, being able to write stories, and it's just been a long road to get there. I say I'm 28 now. I turned 28 this year, and I was like, I need to do it now or not at all. And I've been building up over the last few years. Fan fiction has been really where I have honed the craft, I would say, and got used to writing regularly so that I could make that dream come true for myself, basically. And so I've been writing on and off for quite a while, and yeah, it was nice to hit that milestone and fully get a whole book done and written as a whole, which is great. But I've been sitting on so many stories and ideas for so many years, and yeah, it's just the right timing, isn't it? They say when it's the time, you'll know. And I feel like I definitely did know. The time came about.
You're not the first author that has said those very words, so I do believe it to be true.
And I think that is the thing. I think that's the biggest tip ever, is if you want to get the book written, you need to put in the practice. You need to start having a habit, because even if you're only writing little bits or short stories or whatever it is, writing regularly will get you in a place that you will be able to get past those slow bits and you'll get the book finished, because it's so easy to go into it. I've tried doing NaNoWriMo so many times and so many years, and I've always got on to that sort of 15,000 mark. I've got in like the first week, and then you hit the slump. You start getting towards your middle bit a bit more. You haven't either fully thought out your story, or you know what you want to do, but you haven't got that practice of just sitting down and writing regularly. And so I think it is that thing of, when you start off with shorter stories, and like I say, I started off writing a lot of fan fiction over the last 5-6 years, doing a lot of those short stories, they build up that sort of habit and that thing of sitting down and getting chapters written and little 1,000 word stints here and there until you can sit down and do a whole book, basically. So yeah, I think it is probably one of the best tips I think that's out there, and to make sure people know, it's have a good writing practice and you will get the book written. It will happen for you.
Okay, so you said you wrote fan fiction. Did you publish it online anywhere where people could read
so
it?
I have been writing under a couple of different sort of pseudonyms and pen names over on Tumblr for quite a few years. Tumblr's where I've kind of preferred to be. Obviously, I've read other stuff on other sites before, but I just prefer the community feel of Tumblr. I just dip in and out. I'm of that sort of generation of when Tumblr was first coming about, so it's something that's always been in the background. And a few years back, I just really got into reading a lot of my fan fiction there and finding stuff there, and that's where I stayed within that community, really. And it seemed a bit daunting to go elsewhere at that point. I kind of feel like the old lady of being like, I know my habits and I know what I like, but yeah, it's a bit easy to move that way. when you just do a safe space and you feel like, you know, you've got that anonymity behind you as well. I always say, you know, just put up a pen name. People won't know it's necessarily you, and you can just practice and get better, and people will give you tips or help or encouragement if they're enjoying a story. And over time you just get better, and you can see as well. I look back at some of the early stuff I've written over there, and I look at what I write now and how I write now, and you can see the journey as well of how it's come along over the last few years. So I think that really does help when you want to sit down and write a whole book and just do it and do original work and stuff. It's just an easy way to play with different tropes, different skills, different ways of writing, and just finding your voice as a writer. I think it's such a helpful thing and a helpful skill to have.
Beautiful. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did you come up with your story?
This is why I've been so excited to do this, because I mean, I've been in your link tree. You're quite a tarot girly. I feel like you're quite spiritual as well, aren't you? Yeah,
I do,
so I think you'll find the origins of this really interesting. So right at the top of this year, I was meant to be going and seeing The Wizard of Oz on stage. And the night before, I was in that sort of dozy state, you know, when you're excited for something and you know you've got to get up the next day, like a holiday and things like that. But you're kind of in that relaxed state. And I basically just started channeling in the story. It's like someone lit up the back of my head and was like, you should play with this. And I was like there trying to fall asleep. And in my head, this story started to come through. And so I started making notes of it in my phone. And it was like this pirate story, and it kept spiraling, this mermaid and this curse and all of these sort of bits coming in. And I was like, I'm really excited about this. I want to write this. As I'm bringing in more, like there's a whole 4 books at least that have come into my head in this one night as I'm trying to sleep and not being able to sleep. And I was like, I need to write this. I knew it was like a sort of original thing. I was like, this is what I'm meant to write as an official thing. I've been building up all of my fan fiction stories for a while and all of that. And I thought to myself, you know, this is an original piece. I have to see this through. I have to follow it through. And I started doing that. So then, because it was quite near the end of January, so I was like, from the 1st of February, I'll just start, I will try and see what I get done. And then I was hoping for a summer release. I was hoping I would have my first draft done, because like I say, I've been getting together that sort of practice, that experience. I know how long it took me to write some of my longer stories on my Tumblr and things like that. So I was like, I should have a first draft I want to have done within the 3 months, and then I can start editing and it can be out by the end of summer. But then we got our sausage dog, we got our little Chip, our puppy that came about. And so I wasn't writing for 3 months, because having a little puppy is very demanding. So I had a bit of a break there. But then it got towards the end of summer. I was like, I want to crack down. I want to get this done. I want to get it out this year. I had a bingo card, and one of the things on my bingo card was publish my first book. So I was like, I want to be able to do it by the end of this year. Yeah. So I went back into it. And at this point, I was about halfway through the book, and as I'm writing the book and it's just coming and it's flowing out and I'm in that space again, I start to notice some little things. And this is where it gets interesting. I was noticing little hints and little nods, and I'm writing this whole scene where they go and attack this boat, basically, because they're pirates. They go and they're like, we're going to attack this ship. And in my head it was like, this is a wine ship, what's the take, there's grapes on it and all of this. And I was like, hang on a second, wine. And then I started tracking back a bit more, and I realized, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I really we love Stephen Fry in our house, and his narration and his mythos, all of his Greek mythology. And there's a bit where he references Dionysus and Ariadne, and it comes to me, I'm like, hang on a minute, my main character is Ariadne, and all of this wine. And so I sit and I start tracking back, and then I get this thing of, oh, the ship is called Il Leone, it's the lion, and all of these other little nods start to make sense. And I'm like, oh, this story has come from that, and I've channeled in from Dionysus and all of that. And it was such a interesting, and like I lit up. I was like, my whole energy was like, oh, this makes sense now. And I went back and I was like, oh, all of the little bits, all of the little nods. So things about the Kraken and the tentacles that come up around the ship is supposed to be like his vines when he attacked the pirates, and learning more about Dionysus and seeing all of these more links. And it was a really interesting thing that, oh, I've channeled this in to be this. I always say it's a gift from him to his wife. I'm just a conduit. I'm just the middle person, and it's something that they do regularly. It's something I channeled in as, because I'm a very spiritual person as well, and I read tarot and have been reading tarot online for a few years now. And and I haven't done much deity work. I haven't done much God work before, and so but in the moment, I knew that that's what was going on, and it all made sense. So it's one of those things that I say it's not a retelling of their story, but there are nods to their story with it. That's where all of this came from, and how it channeled in so beautifully. Oh, something just disconnected. I think it was my can you still hear me okay? My headphones are being weird, I think. Should I work out if that was no,
it was just copy for just a
moment. There we go. It's sorted now. So yeah, and that's essentially where the story came from, really. And as I kept going and I was channeling more stuff in, and yeah, the whole thing just ended up being this beautiful story that it has nods to them, but it's not actually a direct sort of copy of their story, which is nice, I think.
Nice. That sounds beautiful. So did you set this up in a way for it to be a series, and are you working on another book?
So far there is definitely there's going to be definitely 4 books, but I have ideas that it can extend out and be another 2.5. I have a novella idea that would bridge the Mermaid's Curse section, so obviously it says it's the Mermaid's Curse part of it, to a Pirate's Curse. And yeah, so there is probably about 7 or 8 books that it could be, and we'll see as we go forward how that pans out over time. But yes, I have a lot of ideas, a lot of different things I want to play with, but this is obviously my starting point.
Beautiful. So are you working on book 2 now, or not yet?
I've been having a small little break as we've been having sort of the Christmas period, and I was obviously stressing a lot towards publication date, so just to give myself a breather. But it is something in the back of my mind, because I don't feel myself if I'm not writing, so it's something I'm itching to sit down and do. I just haven't found the time to start getting in, but it is planned. I have things in the planning process ready to sit and write that first draft again, and I'm hoping to have it out by the end of summer next year.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice. Not too long, really.
No, and that's the thing. That's why the sooner I can sit down and start writing that draft. But yeah, I think, as I said, the more you write, the easier the practice becomes. But yeah, so I've set myself a loose summer date. Hopefully it'll probably be towards the end of August by the time it's fully edited and everything. But yeah, I'm hoping there'll be less hitches, because there won't be any new puppies.
All right. What is your favorite part of the writing process, and why? Or if you do have a favorite part.
It's going to sound really weird, but I'm coming to love the bits when you have writer's block, because those are the most fun bits. And I don't know if it's something that's come about because once I realized that I was working with Dionysus on this, and I started looking more into doing actual deity work and setting up an altar and candles and things, having that moment of block and being like given that message of, well, what could possibly go wrong here? It's that, what is the most randomest thing, because you're writing fiction and I write fiction, so it's what's the most randomest thing you could put in here that your characters have to work their way out of to get to your next point. And so it becomes a very fun thing of, what do I throw in here? You suddenly like, I've got the whole world at my fingertips to throw into the sandbox that is my work in this first draft. And what is the most randomest thing? And sometimes it's a giant wolf from Norse mythology, and sometimes it's other stuff. So yeah, and it's just really interesting way of your characters as well telling you more about themselves, because it's how they react to that situation. Like, what would they do when faced with the most randomest thing possible to get things back on track and get them back to where they want to be, and throwing that spanner in the works, as it were. And I think that's just fun. I am slowly learning to love that part of the process, because it's
Beautiful.
all, you know, when you have the idea and everything's coming out, it's, you
Mhm.
know, that's also fun. But it's like when you have to challenge yourself and you have to come up with something new, although it's frustrating in the moment, the reward of being able to find a way to write yourself out of that is so satisfying, and it just makes you feel more proud as a writer to be like, I beat this writer's block, I did it, I
Right.
got through that bit.
Yeah, I get it. Nice. And do you have any like specific writing routines or habits that help you stay productive?
Well, I've slowly started to book certain time off work, because obviously trying to do this around work, I only work part-time, so I'm quite lucky in that sense in compared to some of my other indie authors who are working full-time jobs, and I commend them so much for that.
Mm.
But I have found blocking out time
Mhm.
every month and using the holiday time I have here, because obviously in the UK we have allotted holiday time and things that we, you
Oh,
know,
nice.
get given to use up. So it's kind of like having a few days here and there where I can be like, well, I will take most of this week off to have a good writing sprint and do things like that. But I will try and keep up my fan fiction habits as well, so that I am trying to write even just little couple hundred
Oh, yeah.
short stories here and there, just to keep the practice of an evening. But I do tend to write a lot better in the evening when everything is quiet and everything's settled, and like I feel a lot clearer to think. But that's, yeah, I think that's more the writing routine I've got into. But as someone with ADHD, I'm very sporadic, so I can be, I have the mood, I'm taking, I'm going to do here and see how much I can get done here. And it's that trying not to beat myself up too much if I'm having a slow day, if I'm having an off day, and being like, oh, I should have written so many words, and just breathing and knowing I will have a better day where I will write 3,000, 4,000 words in an afternoon, and it will just flow easily. And it's
Yeah.
finding that balance, really, that it all just comes with practice, as I say, and being comfortable with yourself, and just, yeah, working out what works best for you and going with the flow and doing that in the moment.
Mhm. Nice. One of my questions was this, but I feel like we kind of answered that, but maybe you could decipher
That's
this.
fine.
It was, what themes or messages do you try to explore in your stories?
I think that's also a fascinating one, because although we talked about the whole Dionysus aspect and everything, I feel a real responsibility, because I do write a lot of romance, and I feel this responsibility to write healthy relationships that both men and women can see and read and learn from both characters, and making male characters accessible. I find, although I myself like reading a lot of the romance that is out there and popular romance on TikTok and things like that, there is an element of over fantastical, isn't there? There's the really tall guys with the really big packages and everything, and I want to bring that down. Or there's a lot of toxicity and glamorizing toxic male behavior sometimes, and the main character kind of brushes that off, and I always take the responsibility to show these characters and these people as being human, but also showing what is healthy, and recognizing between them, like if they see in each other what isn't healthy, so that you as a reader can have a better understanding of, this is healthy in a relationship, this is not healthy in a relationship, what to take and accept and what not to take and accept. Because there is, you know, over here in the UK, there is they called it an epidemic of violence against women. And I know I myself am a queer person, but obviously a lot of people around me as well are in straight relationships and things like that. And I feel like there are a lot of straight relationships that kind of take some of that behavior for granted, or they normalize it a bit too much, instead of you being like, actually, hang on a second, this isn't healthy, this isn't right for me. And I think by having healthy stories that they can read and healthy relationships, to be like, oh, hang on a minute, this is actually what I would like to have in a relationship. It's that when you can see it for yourself, or you see it on this like big screen in movies or anything like that, you can learn more, because there's a step removal in fiction, but you can still be like, actually, that's something that I can aspire to. It's not too out of the box, it's not too fantastical. It's, oh, this is what a healthy relationship could and should be. So although sometimes my characters do have their moments, as most characters do and people do, because we're all only human. But it's that finding that healthy balance and having those conversations with characters, or even their inner monologue sometime, to be like, actually, hang on a sec, am I comfortable with this? Am I not comfortable with this? Am I behaving right as a person? Are they behaving right as a person? And bringing those conversations up as well in the work that I do. I find that a really strong responsibility in what I do as a sort of teacher as well, and life coach and all of that. It comes through.
It's actually a beautiful way you interpreted that, because you're essentially saying you're writing more normal humans, but still creating a fantasy story or placing the humans in the story. Versus a lot of these like dark romance books and all these, you know, trending books, it's a everyday scene setting, but the characters are a little bit out there, more fiction. So I like the way it's kind of going back a little bit more towards fantasy, like I used to read, let's just say 10 years ago. That is actually beautiful the way you put it. So
thank you.
So we don't have to have out of the ordinary, you know, people, characters that you've never seen before to make this story good. This is like thinking it back, like the old movies are books where people would just imagine having this fantasy getaway in this magical world, but the person's just a regular person. you know? I feel like that is a really nice, really nice.
There's I say there's a quote. I am a bit of a Pedro Pascal fan, and there was an interview he did a few years ago where GQ and his 10 favorite things, and one of the items was a book, and he said the words, I think the truth are in fiction, and it was like a light bulb moment hearing that, because I was like, 100%. As a writer, we put so much of our own truth, our interactions with the people around us, in the work that we do. So although there is a lot of the time the fantastical dress of the stories that we do, and we set them in either in the past or in these magical worlds or wherever it is, but at the end of the day, the humanity of the characters that we're writing shines through. And I think that's something that, you know, should be normalized as a way as well. It's not always about, I want to dream about the 6'5" fairy guy who will sweep me off my feet and has all the money. Sometimes it's just a regular guy who's landed in a certain circumstances, and they were raised in a certain way, or they weren't raised in a certain way, and that reflects who they are now, and being very clear about that. And how the female characters react to that as well is very important to me, and whether or not they're going to take it as they are, or have an opportunity to teach that, and that learning, and that come through for a reader as well, and teaching those truths that we have in that glamorized, almost like fairy tales. I always say fairy tales always have their root and their lessons to be learned, but they're dressed up in this fantastical way so that it keeps people entertained, and it keeps children entertained so that they can learn them. And I want that to carry through in all of the work that I do, and there will always be some sort of moral learning and lesson and healing to be done through the books that I write and the stories that I tell.
Beautiful. I love it.
Thank you.
Do you have any favorite scenes or chapters that you've written, like that's your favorite in your own book?
Ooh. It's a funny thing, because where I am now, I can picture the book as a whole, and so there's loads of little pockets of things that I like. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time writing sort of spicy scenes online, and having that translate into this is great and fun. And I think it comes down to less scenes, more individual lines. Sometimes you're in a moment and you write a particular line that just, you're like, oh, everything else obviously is good, but then you get to that line and it just comes out naturally. And sometimes really interesting scenes, or just even mundane scenes, things come out. I had a whole passage of when the characters first get to Nassau and the port of Nassau, and the main character Elias talking about the type of women that he likes, and it's this sort of connection of seeing why he's so intrigued by this main character, because she's a brunette, and it's this whole explanation of, oh, redheads are fiery and they're like the fire that you gather around for warmth, and blondes are like superfoods and they're good for in the moment sometimes, and they give you that shot of energy. But there's something mysterious about brunettes, and they sit in the corner, and you think of like Belle in Beauty and the Beast, and reading books and wanting to dig in deeper. And his whole inner monologue of that was one of the things I'm most proud of in this book. I always come back to that, and I'm always like, I'm really proud of it. And I think I read it to my husband like 3 times, trying to get him to like really pay attention, because sometimes I read my stuff to him while he's falling asleep. He likes an audiobook, and sometimes I'm the personal audiobook.
Nice.
But it was one of those bits, and every time I come back and I read it, and I just feel so proud of that moment and that part, particularly in those scenes. But there's a few different lines like that feel almost classical in a way. You come back and you think of certain lines that are in things like Pride and Prejudice and Going Earlier, and all of those certain lines that sort of stand out to you, like you think Gatsby and the cool and beautiful shirts. There's just certain moments that just transcend a story and a piece, and they feel timeless regardless. And you're like, wow, this is more than just a cheesy romantic sort of flick through. There's sometimes you're like, wow, this is an amazing piece of writing. And when you can recognize that in your own work, there's nothing better than that, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what's the best piece of advice that you ever received from someone else about writing, or maybe learn?
Wow, I think it is just practice makes perfect, and just write, just do it, just start, build yourself up. Sometimes it doesn't matter how long it takes. I think this is the same with anything you want to do. If you were taking a few steps towards it every day, if you write 100 words every day, that's 100 words more than you had yesterday. So even on those low days when you don't really feel it, if you get through those 100 words, you've got something to play with. That's a little bit more sand in the sandbox to make your castle, sort of thing. And sometimes it adds up over time. So never give up, just keep going, keep doing little bits, and soon you'll have enough there, whether that's skill or the actual words and sentences for a whole story, whatever it is. Just don't stop, just keep going, and someday you will reach. It's like every step on the path to get to the Emerald City, you'll get there eventually, as long as you take steps every day and you keep that in your mind to, that's the direction I want to be in. As long as I know I'm taking steps towards that, I will eventually get there. So I think that's something really powerful to take away, and be like, as long as I keep stepping forward, as long as I keep trying and I don't give up, I will eventually get there.
Beautiful. So I do have a question I just thought of, which I actually never asked anyone on this show. I don't know why I never thought about it until now.
That's exciting.
Yes, I'm actually really curious. How do you know when to end your book? Like, how did you know when your story was over and you got to start working on book 2 or whatever?
I think, I don't know, sometimes you just know. Sometimes you know when it's getting too long. Maybe sometimes it's important plot points that happen, and you're like, this is very clearly where this ends up. So with this first one, the whole point is they're trying to get to this chest. So the end of it has to be them finding the chest so that she can find her curse, the thing to break her curse and all of that. And so when you get to that point, it has to wrap up somehow. And so you're like, I have to have that thing, though, that twist that leads in, but you don't want to drag it out too long. And so it's a very fine line to walk, I think. But I think it's once you've got to your pinnacle, because I think you're like, this is the end goal of where they've got to get to for this point. Once you get there, you're like, you need to make it as short as possible. You're like, I need to just have that little bit to keep people reeled in for the next bit. But I think most people would have a clear point of, this is their start goal, this is their end goal, and then you can go from there. I think personally, one of the things I've learned over the years is, one of the sort of random things I picked up, if you're writing a series, write the first one like it's a standalone, because a lot of the times, if you are going to traditionally publish, if it doesn't do well, they're not necessarily going to keep it up going forward. So if you've got at least some sort of conclusion, I always use the Hunger Games as an idea. You've got that sort of cut off of she's gone back home. You know, it's that one and done games. If you never pick it up again and go forward, like it's the one and done games, and you'll have that, oh, I wonder what happened next, or where it went forward, but you have a solid conclusion to a story in that sense. So as long as it makes sense as a whole, and you could stop there if you wanted to and never pick up another book in the series again, I think it's wonderful. But yeah, if you're going to have a series, have that little bit to hold someone on to the next. But I feel like each book should make sense as a conclusion if you can. So if you know there will never be another book, will the reader be satisfied with stopping there?
Okay, that's actually really good advice. Nice.
Thank you.
It's funny you mentioned Hunger Games, because this is a little fun fact. The Hunger Games is my favorite movies and books.
Yes.
And I pick them up and watch them at least once a year, every year, time and time again.
The first time I read The Hunger Games, I was 16. I had just come out of a very horrible breakup, and Katniss was my savior. Like, I read those books back to back 3 times in a row. I just couldn't let it go. And every time, like, the certain points and certain beats that just hit the same every time. Like, in Catching Fire, you know, when they do their sort of, it's not their test, but they're getting their rankings, and she gets the dummy and she dresses it up as Seneca Crane. I laughed at that. Every time I was like, this is so clever. She is so smart. It's such a, you know, in your face sort of to the game makers. And even though I was reading it like the 3rd time, it still got me in that same way.
I feel that way about the movies too. Like, I have to read and watch them. Like, really, it's an annual thing, because they hit the same every single time. It's just something
They're
about those.
so well written.
It is. It's such a good story. So my other question for you is, are you a Disney fan?
I am a big Disney fan, with my Tangled hat on at the moment and my Disney tattoos. Yes. I am. Yeah, I've been an annual pass holder for Disneyland Paris 3 times now. It's my second home. I always think of Disneyland Paris as my second home. If we were to get rid of all other streaming platforms, Disney Plus is the one we would keep. It's the one that brings the most nostalgia. As someone who grew up on fairy tales, I love fairy tales and all of the retellings. I'm a really big Disney fan.
Yeah, like, I kind of had the hunch when I kept seeing your TikToks, but then, like, when I seen your hat, I'm like, oh yeah, Disney fan.
Yeah, I'm a big Disney fan
too, so I get it. That's nice. Okay, so I do have some non-book related questions for you. This is like just to get to know the author.
Wonderful.
But before we get into that, I assume we could buy your book on Amazon, or where can?
Yes. So it's currently available through Amazon, and you can read it with Kindle Unlimited. I'm looking to hopefully get it available in more places soon, but as an indie author, it's kind of knowing where to go, who to trust. A lot of people have obviously used Ingram Sparks, but I'm also learning as I'm going that they're not always the most reliable. So it's doing that research into where else is available so that I can get it in more stores. I can get it out to more places so people have more places to buy it. But it's that getting started. And that's another thing, I think, as an indie author and choosing to be an indie author, is it's okay sometimes to go at your own pace. Especially early on, it's just getting started. It's having somewhere that some people can purchase and read your book or whatever it is. It's building that following. They say it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. So sometimes it's okay to be slower. Sometimes it's okay if it takes a moment, it takes a time to be able to either have the money to get it out to other places and be able to put it in other shops and things like that. But as long as people are able to read it somehow and know you and know your work and become sort of loyal to your work, as long as there's something there for people to start, it gets the ball rolling, as it were. It starts you down that road again to where you want to be in the Emerald City, as I say. I keep coming back to that Wizard of Oz analogy, but yeah, you get down the road, you get to the castle at the end.
That is beautiful. Actually, have you seen the new Wicked movie?
I have seen it twice now. I'm currently wearing my Wicked Crocs from my local supermarket. But yeah, I am a big Wicked fan. As I said, like The Wizard of Oz as well was where the journey of this book started, and it was really, I say, funny how it all worked out, that it's kind of bookended with Oz, my book. You know, I had the idea the night before I went and watched The Wizard of Oz on stage, and then the night that I uploaded my final draft was the night that Wicked was released, and I went and watched Wicked in cinema, and then I went and watched it again the day that my book came out, and my publication day I went and celebrated by going and watching it again. So it has somehow been sort of companion to my work in a way as well. But yeah,
a little bit. So I'm actually a bit curious, is publishing in the UK very different from publishing here in the US, or even like doing traditionally in the UK, or is it?
To be completely honest, I have not looked enough into traditional publishing because in a way it intimidates me. And there is that a lot of, you say, horror stories online, or people coming forward and saying, well, I still have to do so much work considering I am with a publication house, or just being in those circles through TikTok and seeing behind the scenes a bit more, or people talking about things. But I'm also quite a control freak. I like my story how I like my story, and that was a big part of me wanting to be independent, was the fact that I can make those decisions myself. I can choose what the cover is that I want to have and all of those sorts of things. So when it comes to that, I'm not 100% sure actually on the big differences when it comes to traditionally publishing between America and the UK. But I would say everything that I've learned so far from indie publishing has been from American indie authors. So those who share their information online, there is so much information online. If you want to get into it, it's just looking and learning. And I am a bit of an autodidact. I like to learn myself and teach myself how to do things. So it's another part of that, adding the extra skill, as it were, more feathers to the wings and more skills to the backpack to move forward in life.
I feel like, you know, eventually one day as an inspiring writer, I would choose indie publishing. Just from all of the indie authors I've spoken to. Now, I've spoken to a couple of traditionally published authors, but I just feel like I would need that freedom to write.
Yeah, and that is the thing, that it is so much more freeing being on your own time. There's less pressure. You haven't got an advance. You can say, like I say, be a bit more open about when your release date is going to be, so that you give yourself that wiggle room if you need to. You don't necessarily have to be in as extensive edits, as it were. I think when it comes to some indie authors, you can see that maybe they've rushed a little bit and they could have done with more time, but it's what makes you comfortable at the end of the day as well. And as long as you're happy with the story that you've written. But that's the other thing, as an indie author, you can also republish it and refine it as you go, and as people point either little mistakes out. I know I've still got a couple of little niggles that I need to sort of fix, a couple of extra commas that shouldn't be here or there, where I wanted to meet my the deadline that I had set. But I think as you go forward, it's that learning curve, and as you keep going, you will get better. You know, you keep writing and it really does get better as you keep going and you keep learning for yourself. And it's just that control. I like having my own control on things, I guess.
I agree with that. Did you edit it yourself and create your book cover yourself?
I did.
Nice.
So I created my cover using Canva. I've had a Canva Pro subscription for a while because I've created graphics for all of the things that I've done online and blog things that I've done for years. So I'm a dab hand now. I did study graphic design at school. So it's kind of finally come in handy. It's something I haven't been able to really use that much, but it's come in handy now. And being able to choose what I wanted was really nice. And I created my covers long before I'd even finished the first book, and I've got my covers set up for my next ones as well. It's just a fun little activity sometimes, just so you can have an idea of what they're going to look like at the end. And
I'm sure it
as
keeps you
they
motivated
shape
too.
and adjust. It does. And sometimes when you're in that writing block,
Mhm.
having that creative freedom and just letting your mind wander for a moment while you're creating your perfect vision of what you want your cover to be and things like that, can be really helpful just to step away. Plus then it's designed and ready for when you are finished. But you can keep, playing with it for as long as you need to. But when it comes to editing, that I found was a real learning curve.
Yeah.
It's, as someone with ADHD, it was very hard to sit and focus a little bit with it. But I also feel like I straddle a little bit of a line of where I have been writing online for like the last 5 years and developing. And as I say, and I've said quite a few times, the more you write, the better you get. I found the less editing I needed because
Good.
I've already honed my skill and I know what to look for. I think there's also an element of, and I do sometimes put tips on my like TikTok and some random writing tips that people might not have heard of. I also was a media studies student and I specialize like in screenwriting and things like that. And spending the last few years just writing screenplays for fun and movies and TVs, it really helps you refine what you actually need to put in your story. That's, I feel like, a really good what's the word I'm looking for? Not example, my brain's saying example, but activity, practice maybe to implement is doing that, because then you refine the actual things that you need in your story. So you're like, well, I know that this item is special, because when it comes to screenwriting, it's the less writing on the page, the better. So to get across to whoever your director is, your production people, what is actually base and necessary, and also how to make your dialogue move the story along more than your other bits, and using how well you use dialogue, how your characters converse. It really helps with that skill as well. So when you translate that back to writing a book, you're not putting in as much fluff, you're not putting in as much things that don't necessarily need to be there. Sometimes you'll find that, yes, I need to flesh this out a little bit more in editing or things like that. But when you're trying to do that first draft and you need that bare bones of this happens here, this happens here, this happens here, I need this item, I need this conversation to happen, it's a lot easier to work with and a lot easier to get through that first draft, because you're like, well, if I was to send this off as a script, I need it as bare bones, they get from here to here, this is the conversation they have, these are the items that are absolutely necessary for this, anything else is just a little bit of fleshed out, but it's not adding too much fluff that you really need to cut loads of stuff and things like that. So having those practices, doing all of those things when it came to the editing process, I feel like I went through less rounds of editing as say other people would have with their own first books when they're starting out and things like that. So I think I would say probably about 3.5, 4 full edits in total, which I feel like is not a lot compared to some people's first drafts. And they say, they look at their first draft and when they get to the end, they're like, and their final piece is completely different. I feel like the integrity of my story stayed the same a lot of the way through. It was just all in the little picky bits and making sure certain words didn't repeat or spelling mistakes and all of those little things, because I've grown to be quite confident as well in my work and how I write, and it just comes from that practice and doing it for as often as you can.
Beautiful. That was actually really helpful advice, I feel, for some listeners. The majority of my listeners are authors. So that was pretty helpful. All right, friend. I am curious to know, what are some hobbies or things that you're interested in outside of writing?
I picked up crochet a couple of years ago.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was another thing that was on my bingo card, was to finish a cardigan that I started the other year. So I did that in my sort of break between finishing my first draft and starting the editing process. I was like, I need to step away from this. I need to do something completely different, but keep myself active. And so I went back to crocheting and I did that. Obviously, I love tarot. and I do a lot of tarot work,
Beautiful.
and just self-help generally. I'm such a self-help nut, and I love journaling, and well, that's another form of writing in itself, is keeping a journal. But yeah, I love all things like that, and just content creation generally. I'm very creative, and so if I can be making something from nothing, it's like I've got this spark in me that just needs to keep making, no matter what it is, and whatever I sort of turn my attention to, I'm like, I'll learn how to do it, and I'll do it, which annoys the people around me, because they're like, you're so talented at everything, and it's just what I do. If I'm not doing that, I'm singing, or I'm dancing while making coffee in the kitchen. It's
Beautiful. So if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Oh wow, that's the million. If I could live inside Disneyland, if I could live in Disneyland Paris for the rest of my life, if I could take up residence on Main Street, I would be quite happy. Or just living in one of the hotels. I wouldn't even need to go into the park every day. Just being in the bubble would be lovely. But we've always wanted to move to Manchester as well, over here in the UK. If you asked me as a teenager, I would have said New York. I really wanted to be in New York for some reason. So yeah, but I think I'm just learning to be comfortable more around like the people I'm around more than anything. It's like I could be anywhere in the world. I could be constantly traveling if I wanted to, as long as I was with the right people, and I was with people who feel like home. And I always had my husband at my side and things like that. I'm not too attached, as I say, to where I am. It's just, I'm happy to dip in and out and travel and go different places. Like I'd happily live in Italy for a bit, or the south of France, or I'd come over to America for a bit. It's just, I like to travel as well, to see people, and human interaction is a very important thing to me. And so anywhere where I'm able to have a good communication with people and learn and hear other people's stories as well. You never know what's inspiration and what's going to spark the next story for you. So as long as you've constantly got new input to play with, I think that's why I like movies as well so much, and I'm constantly at the cinema to sort of spark that. And you never know where the inspiration comes from. As long as you're taking in new stories all the time, you'll always have something to play with.
Nice. That was one of my questions for you, is what is your favorite movie or TV show? All right. So it's talking about Back to the Future as it being your favorite show. So we could go on from there. I'll piece it together.
Okay, that's fine. So I found obviously that every time I watch it, that it's just something new every time, which is, I like the fact that all the little hidden things and the longevity of a piece, that you can keep following it, and no matter how many times you watch, there is always something new that you didn't always notice. And then my second favorite film of all time, I would say, is Scream, which has surprised a lot of people because I don't like horror. But I love Scream, and I think that comes back to being a media student and the way it sort of looks at the genre and takes the mick out of itself, and once again all of those references to the different movies, so it doesn't feel as horror as other horror stuff does. And so that's always something that I've always loved, the writing of those films as well. And then my third favorite film of all time, obviously, Tangled. I'm a big Rapunzel fan, and Tangled is my comfort movie if I don't feel well, or I just need that little Disney zing. It is just
Rapunzel's my daughter's favorite princess as well.
I cry every time I meet her at Disney. It's quite I would say embarrassing, but I kind of own it at this point.
Okay, it makes you happy.
It is, and I just enjoy the moment. And she's such a creative character, and she has such light. I have her and Meg from Hercules tattooed on my legs, and I always say they're like the angel and the devil on my shoulder of who I want to be. I've got the sarcasm of Meg and the sass and the sort of smarts, and then the optimism and whimsy, as it were, of Rapunzel, and wanting to have that light. So they are like my angel and my devil on my shoulder, and the two sides of me. So
I love it. All right, so tell me, what is your go-to food, like comfort food, or favorite meal?
I mean, pasta. I can't go wrong with pasta. Cheesier the better. It, I would say macaroni cheese, but I am fond of like fettuccine Alfredo and things like that. I think as I get older, it's that I can't say the childish mac and cheese anymore. I go for the sort of upper end
Yeah.
Parmesan heavy. Yeah, lots of garlic, lots of Parmesan when it comes to food. But yeah, I'll eat pasta all day long if I could.
Nice, nice. What's a fun or surprising fact about you that most people don't know?
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think if I've got one. 'Cause I collect sunglasses. There you go.
Oh,
I literally look up to my little sunglasses collection. But yeah, I collect sunglasses apparently is something that I do. I love sunglasses, always have. And yeah, I pick up a new pair whenever I can, and much to my husband's like, "You've got enough pairs." I'm like, "Yeah, I could do with another one."
and if you could meet any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. I feel like there's so many. I know he's a little bit problematic, but I would say I would love to meet Walt Disney because I just want to know what was like going on in his head. And, for being a man, he was also, had that childlike whimsy. He wanted to create a space that was for children and adults alike. And he wanted to take those children's stories and create them into like animated form and all of that. I feel like there's just that whimsy with him, but I'm also a big Disney parks nerd, and so that side of things as well, and wanting to create the theme parks and how he brought people together and the
Hmm?
different Imagineers and made them all of their different tastes and put them together and got people to bounce off him. He's just, although as a person I know that there's a lot of problematic elements about him because of history and the time period and what people learn and how people are, but I think there's also a part of him that has that spark and that childlike spark and that imagination and the way to encourage other people's imaginations as well. I find it's just an inspiring thing, and so I would just to sit in his office for a day and just see how things worked, or just be sat in on his interactions with different Imagineers and people. Yeah, the creativity that comes from there for me as well, and the inspiration I get, I feel like that would be something I'd like. But I feel like there should also be a almost feminist answer to that as well. I would also say if I could meet anyone, would be Howard Ashman, who is one half of like him and Alan Menken did a lot of the Disney Renaissance music, and he passed away from AIDS just before. So he put all of his work, like the last of his life's work, went into Beauty and the Beast, and just as a soul and as a queer icon, and to be able to sit with him as well. And I think he also embodies that whimsy and that wonder from that sort of Disney bubble and that imagination, I think. And also just being masculine, I find that really interesting, having masculine figures who embody that childlike wonder, who aren't afraid of that inner child and who don't use it toxically almost. They know how to embrace it and turn it into art and encourage other people with it. I think is such an inspiring thing, and I guess that's something that, as I come back to, that I want to bring into my own male characters of having sort of a healthy relationship with their inner child. And because I know that is a problem. I seen it in in my husband, and denying his own inner child and his own mental health struggles, and it is a thing. I want my work to be able to appeal to both. As someone who identifies as non-binary, I have respect for people on both sides of the gender spectrum and even outside of that. So to have healthy things for men to aspire to, so that everyone can be balanced, everyone can have healthy relationships, is important. So yeah, actually I'm not surprised that I lent into male inspiration, I guess, from history, and more recent history, should I say. But yeah.
Well, the thing about Walt Disney, I read a lot of stuff about Walt Disney. I watch documentaries, seen the movie and all that. his goal, it wasn't just about bringing out the childlike in adults. It was about creating people can often say a space for families.
Mm.
You think about places like, well, I don't know if they have that in the UK, like the Chuck E. Cheese, which is like an arcade,
I know what
but
you
that's
mean. We'd had a few of that when I was younger. We had things like Brewsters and stuff, but I don't. It's
well,
kind of died out now, unfortunately. But
yes,
yeah, we had
and
like
those are geared more towards children, not for adults. So things like Disney is geared for adults and children.
everyone.
Yes. So that was his goal, was like, I think he even explained it in the movie. Like, he wanted it to be like, instead of just you take your kid to a park to play and the
You
adults
get
are
to be
sitting
in
on
that
a
as well.
bench, yes, you get to actually enjoy time. So I feel like that is what really set Disney apart from everything that even his movies, merchandise, theme parks, everything
It's
they
for
created.
everyone. It's for
Yes.
families, and you have all ages in a family. They're not
Yeah.
children's movies, they're family movies, and you
There you
have children to 90-year-old grandparents who all sit down and watch these movies and can be inspired by these movies. They are family movies. They're for everyone. They're
Yeah.
accessible for kids and for adults. That doesn't mean they're kids movies.
There you go. And that is the magical thing about Disney for me. Like, every time I go and look at it, is that it's not just because we all love, like, okay, I'm a mom, I have I have 5 kids. So it's like, when I'm enjoying spending time with my kids when they're having fun. But I also, when you go to Disney, it's a different kind of fun, because it's not just me watching my kids have fun, it's me having fun with them, which a lot of
Yes.
places don't get that. So a good way for me to explain this: Walt Disney essentially took uh, Toys R Us and Las Vegas and
I
put
put
it
it together. That is so
together.
good. Yes,
So it's
I
like,
see that.
it's fun for everyone. It's not just parents watching their kids have fun. It's you actually enjoying time, which is a very smart thing. And not many people have done this in life. The only other person, because I don't know, businesses and like people creating these successful things is like obsession for me. I love watching people go from nothing into stuff that we still use today.
Yes.
Another obsession I had was McDonald's. Like, I loved reading about the guy who created McDonald's. His goal wasn't just to create fast food. His goal was to create a place for the children and the family. And that's why people equally love McDonald's the way they love, like, Disneyland. It's very,
Yeah,
very smart concept. Yep.
I love when they have like the McDonald's ads that they really do show for everyone, and you have certain adverts that go through that passage of time and how certain people still sit with it. They still sits with them, as you get older, you introduce your own kids to things, and as they grow up, and you get old people who still eat McDonald's. And yeah, I 100% get what you mean.
Like, I mean, McDonald's today isn't as good quality as it was when it first started, especially here in America. Everything's like artificial as it can be artificial. But it's like a rite of passage. Like, I know, like, when my kids are older, my nieces and nephews, rite of passage. Now you're old enough for a Happy Meal, when they take
Yes.
pictures for a Happy Meal. So I feel like McDonald's and like the Walt Disney World Corporation is really the only 2 companies that
They're
got it right.
accessible. They're
Yes.
accessible, and they feel like part of the family in a way, because they're just right. It's, like you
Yes.
say, it's a rite of passage. Everyone at some point will experience either, or at least you
It
hope.
really is.
And a lot of people, even as you say, like Disney adults like myself, there are certain people who
Mhm.
get into it when they're older, when they have the money and the access to do it, and
Yes.
it's always been that dream of wanting to at least try it. And then they
Mhm.
go and they're like, oh, I get the hype or whatever. There'll always be something that they find that's for them. And
Mhm.
that like we love a McDonald's breakfast date in this house. We like going and having a McDonald's breakfast date together. That's
Mhm.
our preferred
It's
option.
crazy. Mhm. It's I don't know, mind-boggling to me how I really can't think of any other corporations that can compare to McDonald's or Disney. There isn't
I mean,
anything.
you've got obviously the whole Universal bubble as well, but I still feel like with that there
Mm-mm.
is in a way like a clear divide between sort of your kids area and your adults areas and things like
Let me
that. I think about obviously going to Florida as a kid and going to Universal and running around Dr. Seuss and not being big enough to go on certain rides. So there is that bit more of that divide in a way in comparison to the Disney rides that are a lot more accessible, as it were, and you still have some of those, you know, high ticket, bigger roller coasters and attractions, but there aren't as many as there are inclusive to everyone attractions.
Yes, Universal is definitely for a bigger audience. We actually went there last year. We done in California. I done Disneyland, and I went to Universal Studios. First time I took my kids to Universal Studios. I, grew up in the Universal Studios in California. Like when I was younger, we lived like around the corner, had season passes. I mean, I watched Universal Studios California go from just being like a place that just had shows and had like 2 rides. Now it's a big theme park. But I remember when it had 2 rides. It was Jurassic Park and it was something else. I forgot Mummy. It was the Mummy and Jurassic Park ride. Is all Universal Studios.
I'm scared of the Mummy. I love the movie. I'm scared of the ride. I hate it.
I know, it is scary. But now it's like this big park with like a Minions land and all this stuff. So I took my kids. Oh, and they put the Mario land in Universal. So I went. I'm excited because I love Universal Studios growing up. My daughter got to go on 1 ride, and my son got to go on 2. So you spend all this money.
Yeah, I find with Universal as well, they've lent a lot more into simulator rides. And so it will never have that same feel as sitting, like you say, the Disney dark rides, and you sit and you go through the story and you see the animatronics. And that's such like an important part of it. I find the animatronics and stuff, not just staring at a screen again and the 3D element. And I think sometimes, a simulation can be done well. I think at the Ratatouille ride that Disney has, and how immersive that is, and the way it does it a little bit differently. But in comparison to, say, like when you do Fast and Furious, or back when they had the Spider-Man rides and things like that, Transformers even at Universal, it does not feel the same as sitting, and it doesn't feel as interactive or as inviting as it is.
You could definitely tell like Universal is geared for older people. And I hate saying this, but they're so anti-children. I didn't know that because I was a teenager going to Universal.
Yeah, I think Universal is very teen and up, I would say.
Like I had people complain about my strollers because I had a small kid, and my son has autism, so they're in their like wagon. The whole Universal complains. They look at you. Like I was telling my husband, like I feel like I came into a nightclub and people are looking at me like, why'd you bring your kids here? Like that's how people are looking at us.
The character experience at Universal is very different as well. And I guess that's the element and the difference between Disney. And although Disney can be very strict on their rules for cast members and things like that, it's very much to maintain the stories and that storytelling narrative. And I think that's possibly why when I think to Disney movies now, there's that element of things are going a little bit downhill, because that story element and that fresh story isn't being prioritized over money. But when it comes to, and even just the rides, you feel different because you're invited into the story. You're not just once again watching a story on a screen. You are fully in it. You're in those scenes, in those rides and things like that. So it feels more immersive as well. And I guess I don't know if it's just because I'm a writer and I value storytelling. I'm a storyteller in many ways. Tarot, once again, is very storytelling heavy. So I just, I'm a writer at heart, and if I can be immersed in a story and I'm in the story and I'm inspired, I'm so much more attached to it.
And that's probably a reason why we're so keen on giving Disney all our money without a regret. I have not one single regret.
I feel bad about it. I'm like, I shouldn't be spending my money still. It's going to a big corporation, but I'm happy.
It's making you happy, and that's the difference that no one will
happy. I'm inspired.
And that really what sets Disney different from everything is because you are freely giving your money and you don't regret a single thing. Like I promise you, I regret spending my money going to Universal. I still like Universal. Me and my husband had fun, but you won't see me back there until my kids are teenagers, you know?
That's the thing. I always say, like, I don't think I'd do Universal again. The only way I would is to introduce someone new to it. And obviously being able to introduce my husband to, like, their family were really big Harry Potter fans before everything with J.K. Rowling. So to be able to invite them into that and that experience, because we have the Warner Brothers tour, the Harry Potter tour over here, and they've done that a few times, and I've always wanted to show them what my first experience walking through the sets was, which was the whole Universal experience. So I think that in a different, I wouldn't go for the rides, I go for the lands that they build, which I think is a bit different, but I don't think it's the same immersiveness that I get once again from Disney. It just flows different.
It does. It really does. It's amazing. I do plan. My plan is to go there January for my son's birthday. So
I hope it works. I hope it works out and you get there. We all need that dose of magic, I think.
We do. All right, my friend. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I am such a night owl. I don't know if it comes down to my ADHD, but I really struggle to get going in the morning. I've always been a night owl, much to my mother's chagrin. She hated the fact that I was like, I can't sleep. I'm having nightmares. I can't switch my brain off. So I end up automatically up late anyway. And I feel like I function a little bit better when the world is a bit more quiet. That's why I end up getting a lot of my work and my writing done in an evening, even if it's, you know, lying in bed next to my husband and writing for an hour or two until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and just writing from my phone. And then obviously in the mornings I will not be awake before 10 unless I have to be. The only time I can get up early in the morning is if I'm doing a Disney day. That's why that's I'll get up for Disney, I'm not getting up for anything else sort of mentality. But yeah, I am much more a nighttime person though, to be fair.
That's hilarious. Me and my family, my son has autism, so like, you know, he's up all night long. So
I have both. I have the double. They fight with each other a lot. It's very difficult. It's amazing that I wrote a book at all.
Well, congratulations on that.
I know.
It's a good accomplishment.
That's why it took me so long to do it.
It's done, you know. But we're up all night long, and we are not the earliest risers. My whole family. It's a shame. And I mean, I thank God that I'm able to work from home and I schedule my appointments a little bit later because of my son. Like he even keeps my toddler up, you know. But let me tell you, when we're in Disneyland, I promise you,
you're up as soon as sun up.
We are at Road Drop.
Road Drop, and I'm staying till fireworks too.
Yes, we are there until it closes.
I will pace myself and I will do the whole day.
Yes, we do the same thing. That's funny. What's a song or artist that you've been listening to maybe on repeat lately?
I mean, I'm a big Swiftie. I've had a lot of I went to the Eras tour this year, so we've had Taylor Swift on a lot. But I find I write a lot to Lana Del Rey. I do a lot of writing to Lana Del Rey, and this year as well, Florence and the Machine has come into that a bit more. I think it's because there is that sort of whimsical sort of feeling. It's not too fast paced. So yeah, I'd say between the three of them, there were certain songs that just really helped me get through the writing process. And Aurora as well. She is, if you know the sort of Frozen, she does that. She does that. So yeah, her music has been good background music to write to as well.
Oh, nice. All right, my last question for you, and then I'll let you go. Kept you for a while. Is are you a coffee or a tea person?
It's so funny because I was neither for so long, and then I started working in a cafe and learning how to make coffee, and so then I got into coffee, and then but being British, obviously, I've always wanted to do tea, but it was only last Christmas that I tried it again. Obviously I've tried it many different times in my life and been like, oh no. Last year was the year that I was like, oh, actually I like this now. So I do even out. I have one of each a day. So I'm very much in the middle now on, but I think I'll always take my coffee over my tea. Oh, I haven't got any sound. One sec. What's happened to my sound?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there we go.
Before we end the episode, I was saying go ahead and plug in your social media, websites. Where can listeners find you?
So I have 2 TikToks mainly. I have my writing TikTok, which is Arien C, but I also have my tarot, my life coaching. Everything else goes into Rock and Roll Madonna. And I'm also Rock and Roll Madonna on Instagram as well. And that's the main 2 platforms I tend to stay on these days is Instagram and TikTok. So
okay, nice. All right. Well, it was fun chatting with you. And I do hope yeah, I really enjoyed it. I am excited. I'm going to read your book. You had me at that one TikTok that talked about it being like Pirates of the Caribbean and Little Mermaid.
It really is.
Both my favorite shows. I love them. So yeah, it was nice chatting with you. Enjoy the rest of your night, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So nice being here. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Bookish Spell. I hope you enjoy our magical bookish journey together. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And feel free to leave a review. It really helps. I'll be back next Wednesday with more enchanting stories and author insights. Until next time, keep the magic alive in your hearts and on your bookshelves.